So a while loop is basically a structure in Python which allows us to loop through and execute a block of code multiple times. So I would specify a few different lines of code, and when I put that code inside of a while loop, it should basically loop through that code, executing it repeatedly until a certain condition was false. So while loops are really awesome, and there's a lot of different situations in Python where we are going to want to loop through specific lines of code. So in this tutorial, I want to show you guys the bare basics of how a while loop works, and in future tutorials we're going to use while loops to create little games and stuff like that. Okay, so let's talk about while loops. When I create my while loop, the first thing I want to do is create an integer. That's basically creating a variable that is a number. You don't have to do this for a while loop, but I'm going to be using an integer for this demonstration. I'm going to call this I, and I want to set this equal to 1. Now what I want to do is create a while loop. So I'm basically going to say while, and over here I want to specify a condition. This is what we call our loop condition, or you can also refer to it as a loop guard. So basically we're going to keep looping through this code inside of this while loop as long as this condition is true. So whatever condition I put up here, as long as it's true, we're going to keep looping through the code inside of the while loop. So I'm going to say while I is less than or equal to 10. Now I'm going to put a colon, and I'm going to move on to a new line so that anything below this while loop declaration and that's indented like this is going to be considered code inside of the while loop, and that code is going to get repeatedly executed while the condition up here is true. So I'm going to put a very simple line of code. So we're going to print out the value of I, and then down here I'm actually going to increment I. So basically I'm going to add 1 to I. So I'm going to say I is equal to I plus 1. So basically I'm taking the value of I and adding 1 to it. There's actually a shorter way we can do this in Python. To do something like this, so I can say I plus equals 1, and that's automatically going to add 1 to I. It's like a little shorthand that you see a lot of people in Python using. So over here we basically have our while loop, and we have the outline of the while loop. So we're finding this variable up here, and we're going to keep looping through the code inside of the while loop for as long as the condition up here is true. So if the condition is false, for example I is equal to 11, then we're not going to loop through this code anymore. We're just going to move on. So down here I'm going to say print done with loop. So this is going to illustrate this for us. So let's go ahead and run the program. So when I run it, you'll see down here we're getting some output. We're actually getting some numbers printed out from 1 all the way to 10, and then we're printing out done with loop. So basically what's happening is we're printing out a new number every time we run through this loop. Let me explain. So initially I is equal to 1, right? The first thing that Python is going to do when it gets to this loop is that it's going to check this condition. So before it does anything else, it's going to check this condition and it's going to say, okay, I is less than or equal to 10, and that's true. And as long as that guy is true, we're going to go through this loop and loop through all the code inside of here. Then we're going to print out I, which has the value of 1, and then we're going to add 1 to I. So then I is going to change to 2, and what we're going to do is we're going to go all the way back up here to this while loop declaration, and we're going to check the condition again. So remember, I checked the condition the first time and then looped through all the code. Then I went back up here to the top and I checked it again. So I'm going to say, okay, I is less than or equal to 10 at this point. And at this point, I is equal to 2. So it's less than or equal to 10. So now we're going to go through and execute all this code again. And then we're going to print out I. So it's going to be 2, and then I'm going to add 1 to I. So now we have 3. Then Python's going to go all the way back up here and it's going to check the condition again. So it does this on every iteration in the loop. Before Python does what's inside of the loop, it's going to check the condition, and as long as the condition remains true, we're going to keep executing the code inside of the loop. Eventually in this program, I is going to be 11. So on the last iteration, it ends up being 11. We're going to come back up here and we're going to say, is 11 less or equal to 10? And it's not. Since it's not, we're going to come down here and we're going to print out this done with loop line. And that's the basics of how these while loops work. We're specifying a loop condition, and as long as that condition is true, we'll keep executing the code inside of the loop. And after every execution of the loop, we're going to come up here and we're going to check the condition again. That's how we end up printing this down here. And that's the basics of a while loop, and we can use while loops to do all sorts of things. While loops are very powerful. And that concludes this video. If you enjoyed it or learned something, consider leaving a like and subscribing. Turn on post notifications to be the first to know when I publish a new video. Also, if you have any constructive criticism or any questions or anything, comment them down below. Until next time, thanks for watching. Peace.